Hello, everyone. It's Andrew Lazaga here to welcome you back to another episode of the Dubcast with Dubside. Dubside's away this week, so I'll be talking with Greenland Style paddler Tim Gallaway. Tim is an ACA instructor and a mentor at the Michigan Training Camp. In 2018, he participated in the Greenland National Kayaking Championships. And most recently, he completed a 650-mile, 28-day trip along the shores of Lake Superior and Lake Huron. Welcome, Tim, and thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So let's start at the beginning. How did you first get into sea kayaking?
So I grew up in northern Michigan, and I grew up canoeing and kayaking on the local rivers and lakes. And when I got a bit older, I sailed on the little lake that I lived near with my dad and my grandpa a lot. So I was always around the water growing up, and I was around boats, and I love boats and being around the water now. Mm-hmm. But my high school actually had a kayaking club. A couple of the teachers were sea kayakers, and every year they would gather up a group of students that wanted to go, and we would do a one pool training session sort of thing, and then go for a long weekend paddling somewhere. So the very first kayaking trip I ever took was to the North Channel of Lake Huron when I was a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And so from that I was paddling in the club every year, and then when I got to college I was looking for a cool summer job that wasn't an engineering internship. And I found an outfitter that was only about 45 minutes away from where I went to school. And I sent her an email, and I said, hey, I'm a kayaker. I want to learn some more stuff. I'm looking for a job. And weirdly enough, she gave me a job. And so I spent 5 summers guiding on the north shore of Lake Huron in the Lachino Islands, and just learned everything basically from scratch there. I had realized going into it how little I actually knew, but of course I thought I was, the bee's knees when I got there, and then I was very, very quickly humbled.
Humbled by the conditions?
By the conditions, by my boss's skill level, by the expectation of what guiding, the skill set that guiding requires.
Yeah.
And so that always left me striving to practice and get better and learn new things. And it was one of those cases where the more I learned, the less I knew. Mm-hmm. And I feel I'm still in that, still riding that wave of not knowing anything.
Yeah, I've been on a few guided trips, and I'm really impressed by how much kayak guides need to know and need to do. I mean, they need to cook and guide and be a naturalist and teach and rescue people and be entertaining. It's a huge job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm going to add to that list. They have to be a stand-up comedian. They have to be a medic.
Yeah.
They have to be a meteorologist. They have to be a fisherman. Depending on where you are. Like, it's a lot of hats to wear. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things. Like when I was working there, my boss had a great bookshelf, and you basically just pick the first book off, and it might be like the BCU canoe manual, from 1997 or something. And you read it and you're like, oh wow, there's all these things I need to practice. And then you go to the next one, and it's a natural history of northern Michigan and the upper Great Lakes. And then like, oh, okay, I didn't know that about the geology. And then you go to the next one, and it's ecology, and you just, kind of cycle down. And yeah, it just really forces you to be a sponge.
So you said that your college class had pool sessions. Did you learn to roll pretty early then?
Well, so it was actually my high school.
Oh, your high school, yeah.
I would say I did a roll in my first pool session when I was a freshman in high school. But it was a very quick, very dirty roll, and it was basically just getting you comfortable being in the water, being able to do rescues. And I remember learning to roll and then not really using it for several years, or needing to use it. But I got a kayak when I was a little bit older, and maybe a junior in high school or something, as a Christmas present. And I took it out in May, I think it was, on the lake that I grew up near. And I had a nice paddle, and I got to the end of my day, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try rolling. Like, I know how to do this. And I set up, and I like thought through all the steps, lean over and edge and brace, and then sweep the paddle, and I'm like, oh, I can do this. Tipped over, boom, straight out. Fell out, water was freezing cold, and just popped up, and then was, again, very humbled by the water, which is a recurring theme, I think, in my kayaking career.
So how did you get into Greenland Style?
I'm going to put that up to my boss, Jessie, at Woods and Water, where I was guiding. She used the Greenland paddle most of the time when she was guiding and teaching. And so I saw her do some rolls, and I was always so cool to see her like just do a balance brace, during a tour to just like show what a kayak and a paddle could do. And so she saw me take an interest in this, and then was able to kind of nurture my interests. And she had on that bookshelf Dubside's rolling DVD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so she lent that to me, and that became my obsession very quickly. I was staying in this small cabin just outside of town, and there was no internet, and so I would get off work, and I would go home, and I would eat dinner, and I would pop in that rolling DVD and watch a couple of the rolls and study them and like take notes, like, okay, that's what he's doing there, and he's not lifting his head, and he's driving with his legs, and then the next day I would go for a rolling session after paddling all day and guiding trips, and then I would get that one roll figured out, and I would go to the next, and then I'd try the shotgun roll, and then I'd try a balance brace, and over the course of a couple summers I was able to build up most of the rolling list, just learning by myself, basically.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a kind of a lonely existence, so it gave me an excuse to spend a lot of time in the water.
That's great that you were able to teach yourself all those roles.
Yeah, it was Jessie. She was my boss. She was able to give me like the key entry points. She was able to help me refine my first roll, and then after that I could elaborate, and that really helped me learn too that once you have the basics, like once you have that standard layback roll really dialed in, all the rest of them are just subtle elaborations. Mm-hmm. They're small tweaks. They're just flourishes to it. And after I got most of the laybacks, then the forward finish, I started working on those, and those took a while because I had no reference point, because everything I knew up until then was layback, and I didn't know anybody that could do them. So it was a lot of trial and error and struggling and practice, and then going back and watching the rolling DVD and going, oh, okay, he's doing it this way. His body's turned that way, and he's driving at that point, and then I was able to figure it out.
What do you think it was the main point of the forward finishing rolls that made you consistently successful?
It was the combination of driving your legs and your body. And that's something that I find, and actually I kind of have stolen this from James Mankey, who I know was on the show a while back. Mm-hmm. It's the load and the drive. That's something he says often. And it's all about basically coiling your body into a position that you can then burst forth with energy, right? So like for the forward finishing roll, it's really arching your back, trying to lift your head up out of the water, get your eyes up out of the water so you're looking across the surface, and it's getting those shoulders flat. And it's really twisting and flexing up into that position. And then it's that snap, it's that driving with the legs, and it's going from that arch to a curl. And once I felt that happen the first couple times, it's like, oh, okay, that's easy. Mm-hmm. And so I've noticed I developed a very strong hip flex, or leg drive, hip snap, whatever you want to call it, from watching Dubside's rolling DVD. And it was kind of I felt like a kindred spirit almost, because he was always rolling that feathercraft of his, which was 25, 26 inches wide or something, and I was rolling a Valley Aquanaut, which is a big touring kayak. I've heard people call them a freighter before. And yeah, they're a great big kayak, but I'm a great big guy. I'm 6'4", 6'5", so I'm not the usual sized person that you see doing these techniques. But knowing that I could do the roll in any kayak, from seeing, there's the upside, you can do it in anything. Well, I must be able to do it too. I just got to practice. I got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads to a funny story. So when I was one summer, I think it's my second summer guiding, I was feeling pretty strong rolling, and I was kind of getting a little arrogant to my abilities, I might want to say, like before I was humbled again by the water and having to teach this stuff. But I tried rolling a great big tandem that we had, and I remember watching Dubside do it, and I can do this too. And I went and I rolled, and I came up, and it felt like taking a whipper on a like when you're rock climbing. It felt like falling into a harness, because the thing was so wide that when it came back upright, it just drags you out of the water. So it was like being grabbed by the belt buckle and just yanked. And so it's like a chiropractic adjustment. You just feel your back go click, 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 click all the way up your spine.
Well, at some point you must have run into people who were teaching Greenland Style.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of interest in the Great Lakes region and Greenland Style at the time, and any Greenland Style events going on?
Yeah, so the main event in Michigan that I have attended for years is called Kayak Training Camp, and it's on the shores of Lake Michigan, and it's a kids camp most of the year, and it's only accessible by water, so people have to paddle in, and you spend the whole weekend there, and then you paddle out, and you can go surfing on Lake Michigan, and you can work on the inland lake where it's nice and protected on your rolling. And that was the first event I ever went to, and I went to it not really knowing anybody. I wasn't part of the community yet, and I showed up, and I was walking into a family reunion, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that was my family, and it really drove home that there's other crazy people like me out there in the world, and I didn't know it yet, and so there's a ton of those people that I met that first year that have gone every year for the last 10 years, and I see them in events in Minnesota, and I've seen them in New York, and I've seen them in Washington, and they start popping up all over the place. I've stayed at friends' houses and gone out to dinner with them, and they've really become family. And I think that's the really special thing about the traditional paddling community, and I guess the paddling community in general, is that there's really not a whole lot of us out there. Mm-hmm. So once you find people, once you meet people, you might not know them directly, but you know someone that does. Mm-hmm. Or you start referencing, it's like, oh, well, I did a trip with Joe the other day, and they say, oh yeah, Joe from that town over there. You go, yeah, that's him. Oh, we're good buddies. And that's kind of how like Dubside is one of those people. Yeah, it's like you could go anywhere in the world and you see someone with a Greenland paddle and say, oh yeah, Dubside, I worked with him on some Greenland ropes move, and they go, oh yeah, me too. That was last year when he was visiting. And so it's so amazing to find such a tight-knit community that is so passionate about the same things. Yep. And the wonderful thing about it too is that you have some people that are super rollers, and there's some people that are paddlers, and that like to just go and paddle, and there's racers, and there's surfers, and there's kayak builders and paddle carvers, and harpoon throwers, and there's kind of people that specialize in one thing or the other, or one thing really takes all of their passion, but they're still in the same community.
Yeah, when I first went to the South Sound Traditional Inuit Kayak Symposium, that was like a life-changing event for me.
Right.
Getting hooked up into this community where people were expert kayak builders and, amazing coaches. And there's just so much to explore there. And so much to learn.
Yeah, and you don't know what you'll learn from whom. I always love watching other coaches teach, because everybody does things a little differently. They all think of things a little bit differently, and so it happens all the time where we'll be on the water and you'll be working with someone on whatever they want to work on, and it'll be going along, and then you kind of hit a stumbling block, and they don't quite get a body motion or a paddle sweep, or something isn't clicking, and you might try for a few minutes, and then let's take a little break, paddle around for a few minutes, loosen up, warm up, and then go over and talk to Henry or Danielle or whoever. Go to them, because I think that the way you will learn from them is better than the way you'll learn from me, or you two will click because they teach it in a different way than I do. And it's, I think, being able to recognize those differences and always accept that you're going to be learning, is what makes this sort of community and this style of coaching special. Because like in the traditional community, we don't really have set classes or tiers. Some people will spend 20 years and all they teach is the basic layback roll and balance braces, but they do it so perfectly and so well and so gently that people learn it, and they learn it solid. Whereas then there's other people that might only want to teach super advanced forward finish hand rolls, but they do that really well, and they can't be bothered with teaching beginners. It's like everybody has kind of a niche that they can fall into and specialize and learn. And so, yeah, if you're ever at these events, you can learn a lot just by watching other people learn.
Who were your coaches, and how did you prepare for the 2018 Greenland National Kayaking Championships? For instance, travel advice and how to participate in that competition.
For training, I kind of went back to the basics for a lot of it. I went back to the rolling lists, and I actually found a DVD player. I had to hunt for one, and I rewatched some of Dubside's and Maligiak's rolling DVDs, just to kind of refresh some of them in my head, and spent a lot of time practicing. But for just getting there and kind of knowing what to expect, I emailed Maligiak Padilla a number of times, and he was great for getting me in connection with people that were in Nuuk, which is where it was in 2018, and got me in touch with Pavia, who's the leader of the Kayak Nuuk kayak club, and they just kind of helped me figure out some basic logistics of how to get there, when to get there. The hardest logistic for me for that event was a kayak, sourcing a kayak.
Yes.
So like I said, I'm 6'4", I'm 6'5", I have Irish hill walker legs. I'm good cross country, but I don't fit very well in most kayaks. Mainly because my knees don't bend backwards is really my problem, which is something the Greenlanders seem to have no problem with. So finding a kayak that was going to be a good racer and a good roller, I knew was going to be very difficult. So what I ended up doing is I ended up building a skin-on frame based on a rolling kayak that I built. Made it a little bit bigger, a little more volume to make it a little better all around. But I built this skin-on frame, and then I cut all of the main frame pieces into about 4-foot sections. And then I put those into a wooden box that ended up being about the size of a golf bag. And I took that with me to Greenland on the airplane. And then I spent a couple days reassembling it in Nuuk.
Wow.
But it was a lot of work, but I think it was worth it. I mean, I had a kayak that fit me. That was the main thing.
Yeah.
But in the build up to all of this, though, like I had this kayak and I was most of the way done with it, and I was then thinking like, oh crap, I never actually asked anybody from the Nuuk Kayak Club if I could actually use their space to build it, because it'd take me 4 or 5 days to kind of put it back together. And this really shows the kind of part of the Greenland culture and relaxed nature of a lot of things. Because I found Pavia on Facebook, and I sent him a message and said, "Hey, I have this kayak. Can I use your shop to build it?" And he just went, "Yeah, no problem."
Nice.
And that was it. But I was so used to the American neurosis of, I gotta check with everybody and make sure it's all good, and I gotta follow the rules. But they're just, yeah, no problem. Yeah. Basically, I showed up and I stayed out of the way as much as I could, and I think they liked me being there as a novelty more than anything. Awesome. So.
Wow. What did you find out about how these kayak clubs run, these local kayak clubs in Greenland? Do people participate year-round, and do they teach rolling out in the cold water, and how does that work?
The one thing to remember is that there's a big discrepancy between clubs as far as participation and funding, and general resources available. So I was in Nuuk, and Nuuk is a big city. It's a big city. It's about 17 or 18,000 people or so when I was there. And it's the largest city in Greenland. It's the capital. Mm-hmm. And so they have a beautiful aquatic center. Beautiful pool and hot tub and saunas, and really nice. And they also have some corporate sponsors, essentially. Like they were getting sponsorship from a local shipping company and a fishing company, and so they had a bit of money, and they also had a lot of people. The team is quite large there, and so because they have these resources, they have a pool they can practice all winter in, and they have a big rack of kayaks, and they have space to build kayaks and stuff. But then I know other clubs, they have many fewer people, and they don't have the pool, so they can't paddle all year round. And so I know, depending on the town and where people are coming from, there's some people that hadn't rolled or been in a kayak probably since the last competition, the summer before. But that never stopped anybody. That's the brilliant part, is that they were there and they were still going to race and they were still going to roll. They might not do as well as they would like, because they hadn't practiced, but they were still there. They were still giving it their all. And that's really the main thing about these events, is yes, it is a competition, and there's people get medals and trophies get handed out, but it's a cultural festival. It's a big party a lot of times. People are cheering and having fun, and the thing I always like to say is that during the races, the men's race, when in the women's race, and the teenagers, when they come in and they take off, everyone's screaming and hollering, and it's a big exciting time on the shore. But the loudest cheers are always from the kids. From 4 years old, just these little children in these kayaks with duck decoys as outriggers. There's some adorable photos online of it. Up till 10, 11, 12, 13, up, those little kids get the loudest cheers of anybody. Because for one, it's so adorable. It's the cutest thing you'll ever see. But also, the Greenlanders recognize it, and everybody realizes that this tradition almost died out, and it was very, very close to dying out. And the only way that they'll be able to preserve it and keep it going to the next generations is to get those next generations involved with it, where it's not just a summer fun weekend thing to go travel somewhere and hang out by the water. They want it to be a way of life. Mm-hmm. They want they want their heritage to be a living part of their day-to-day life. And they might not be seal hunting anymore, but they can still go for a nice evening paddle, just like anyone else all around the world. Just for them, there's so much more history to it. The kayak was what their ancestors used to survive.
Yeah, the impression I got from watching your videos of the opening ceremonies of the parade with all the Greenland flags and going to the old seal hunters memorial, it's this very solemn ceremony. It's like, this is kayaking religion we're seeing here. This deep reverence for the kayaking culture.
Yeah, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. standing up on those rocks overlooking the sea. And for me, going into it, it was a strange experience because I don't speak Danish. I know some Greenlandic words, but they're all related to Greenland ropes and some rolling technique terminology. So I wasn't really able to follow along with what they were saying, but you could feel the emotion in the crowd. Like when they started singing up there, like, I started choking up, and I saw it and I didn't really know what was going on, but Jakob Peter, who was one of the competitors and member of Kayak Nuuk, like, I saw he was a flag bearer, and I saw him start to choke up when we were up on the rocks there. And I remember seeing Elias, I think, who kind of held his shoulder for a minute, and I asked Maligiak, like, what was going on, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, so it was some relation of his, it was like his dad or his uncle or someone that he was very, very close to had passed away just earlier that year, and he was a big part of the club and part of that family. Like our kayak events, become our family. It's like it's their actual family, and that was a very personal memorial. He wasn't just doing it for the seal hunters that had gone and paddled out and never come back. It was for the people that had always been there with him that were no longer there. It was very moving, and I didn't do it justice with the video. I don't feel a lot of times.
Well, I really enjoyed the episodes that you put up on YouTube. My partner Kylie, though, we were watching it, and I have to say, we were a little disappointed that we didn't get to see you rolling in the competition.
It's one of those things where if I'd had enough forethought, I probably could have gotten Dubside to film it because he was up on shore, watching. But it was just like I was rushing around trying to get ready, and it was one of those things where I could either participate or I could film.
Yeah, like we mentioned, it's tough to do both at the same time.
Oh, it's so tough. And to be honest too, like I didn't really roll the best that I could have. The kayak that I built was really pretty, but it had no secondary stability.
Oh, yeah.
So it was not a very good roller. There were a bunch of them that like I tallied it up after I got home, and if I'd been in my own rolling kayak that I have here, I probably would have gotten about 40 or 50 extra points.
Oh, wow.
Just because the stabilities were different or non-existent in the kayak that I was using.
It's quite an accomplishment to bring the pieces over there and finish the kayak and participate in the competition. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment in itself.
Getting it there was the hard part, really. Yeah, because it was in that box. That box weighed, it was like 35 kilograms.
Yeah.
70 pounds or so, and that's because it had the kayak and the skin and goop to seal it.
Yep.
And it had all the hardware, and it had extra pieces, and it had drill bits and sinew, and then the box itself. And so I always joke I had to carry it through Chicago, Keflavik, Reykjavik, Keflavik again, Kangaluswak, and then Nuuk. And then, but I left it there. I didn't bring it home. It's still sitting on the rack in Nuuk.
Cool. So knowing what you know now about building kayaks, what do you think makes a good rolling kayak?
Okay, well, so the first one that's always pretty easy and straightforward is a low back deck. Mm-hmm. Just being able to lay back easily on the back deck is critical. There's a couple ways you can do that besides just having the low back deck. You can have some cheats, I guess if you want to say, or hacks, whatever you want to use. If you were to look at a museum kayak, a seal hunting kayak, the cockpit coaming itself is very small. It's very short front to back.
Okay.
And it's about the same distance as the Iserfik, the backboard, where your back band, and to the Masik. It's only that big. And what I found, kind of stealing ideas from like Turner Wilson and my friend Chuck and some other builders I know in the Great Lakes, is what you can do is you can pull that Iserfik, that backboard, back, like a fist or so, 3, 4, 5 inches, and then you stretch the coaming out as well. So the coaming starts to become a little bit more shaped like a keyhole. I mean, not that extreme, but it just gets longer, more oval. So that way you have, if you're looking from the back, you have coaming and then Easterfik and then a bit of space and then where your back sits.
Okay.
And so what that allows is that you can lean back. You can literally just lean back and lay over instead of having to really arch your back to get up and over the Easterfik and the coaming. So that's a nice little cheat that allows you to get back. But the one that I tend to do in my kayaks when I build them, and it's partly for comfort and making the kayak more of an all-rounder, is I like to have a little bit more space in the foredeck than a lot of skin-on-frames do. Most skin-on-frames, especially museum kayaks that are, they have a very, very flat deck. It barely rises an inch or two above kind of the height of the gunnels. It's very, very low. And if you're a Greenlander and you can bend your knees backwards, or the kayak is perfectly built for you, that's fine. You can get in. But if you have a bigger build or you don't have the flexibility to really straighten your legs out and hold them flat like that design really requires, what I like to do is, just lift the masik, lift the foredeck up a little bit, and it makes it a little bit more like a production sea kayak. So your knees are lifted up. It makes it much more comfortable to sit in the kayak, makes it easier to get in and out. You can still outfit it so you have really good points of contact with your knees and your hips. But having those knees up a little bit, it just takes all the stress out of your hamstrings and off your lower back, and it lets you get a lot lower quicker. So it might not be a perfect replica, but it's a kayak that functions for what you want it to do. That's usually where I land in that kind of debate of a replica kayak versus a modern adjusted kayak. Like I said, I'm a tall guy, and I'm head and shoulders taller than a lot of the Greenlanders that I met. The skin-on frames that were made for seal hunters were made for much shorter people than me, so I would never fit into one of their kayaks anyway. And so I did like they would do, is you adjust it to fit you. Adjust to fit your body and also the type of water that you want to paddle. The wonder of the skin-on frame is that you can very easily and very quickly make modifications to suit your body, the style of paddling you want to do, the water you want to paddle on. And you can perfectly custom build it to whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. That's why I built my first skin-on-frame kayak, is because I wanted something that would fit my body. And,
Exactly.
And the kayaks available at the time were made for much bigger people.
Yeah, there were so many kayaks that I tried when I was kind of new to the scene and going to my first few events that were these beautiful low-volume things, and I could get up to my knees in them. I just physically could not get into them. And I so desperately wanted to, but I just, I would have to cut my legs off at the knees to even have a dream of wiggling my way into them.
Yeah, that's too bad, because at a lot of these events, people bring all their kayaks that they've made, and part of the fun is trying everybody else's kayak.
Right. My friend Chuck built a kayak probably 5 or 6 years ago now that was based on one of my best friend's kayaks. And so it ended up being kind of this beamy, comfortable skin-on frame, and had the big cockpit like I was describing. And it's super comfortable, and my wife fits in it well, and we ended up buying it at an auction that we had at kayak training camp. And it's one of the best rolling kayaks I've ever paddled. It's so comfortable. It's a bit big and loose, but we ended up taking that one to events as a coaching kayak, because we can fit anybody into it, and it rolls really well. So even if people think, oh, I could never fit into one of those little skin-on frames, they go, yeah, well, we have one that you will. And so we've been able to get a lot of people into their first skin-on frame because there's one that's built to fit anybody. Plus, it's a good roller. Yeah, Chuck did a really good job on building that one.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be very low volume and tight fitting to be a good roller.
I don't know all the subtleties of it, but there's so much to do with the shape of the hull. and the shape of the deck and the shape of the gunnels and everything. It's a magical combination when they all click. So like the kayak that I built that I took to Greenland, I kind of screwed it up because I made it a little bit deeper to give it some volume, because I don't know if my rolling kayak would pass the official rules for freeboard.
Okay.
Because in Greenland they have to have, I think, like 3/4 of an inch or an inch or something like that, or 3 centimeters might be, of freeboard behind the cockpit in order to be allowed in the rolling competition. I don't know if mine would pass that. So I tried to make it a little bit bigger, but in the process of doing that, I screwed up the hull shape. So it lost that stability that I had in my rolling kayak.
Okay.
So all of those dimensions, if you make it a little bit wider, then the depth has to work accordingly. The width of the chines has to flow with it accordingly. And I wish I could say follow this equation, but I don't have enough kayaks under my belt yet to really pick out what those key characteristics are. But I can tell you when I feel it. You know, that's always the curse of this, is I know what I want to feel. I just don't know. I don't always know exactly how to make it happen.
Have you recycled some of your old skin-on frames, like taken the skin off and rebuilt them? And
Not yet. The very first one I built, I haven't paddled it in a couple of years, and I've really thought about reskinning it and redoing the shape of the bow.
Yeah.
Mainly, it's a little blunt, so I would sharpen it up a little bit, sweep it out a little more. But the problem I have is it just looks really good. Like the skin looks great. You know, it's really it's pretty. You know, I don't want to screw it up by redoing it. It'll need to happen eventually on a couple of them. My rolling kayak is the skin is getting a little worn from use. You know, it happens.
Yeah, that doesn't last forever. And the skin-on frame I'm paddling now, I originally built in 2006, and it's on its third skin. And I had completely rebuilt it. I cut off a couple feet from the length. It was 19 feet, and now it's 17.
Cut off like shorten the gunnels themselves.
Yeah.
Holy moly,
yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I had to redo the stems, but the gunnels are the original ones, and the ribs are the same. And I made the deck a little bit roomier in the front. So it was really satisfying to rebuild it because it had been sitting around for a few years, completely unused. And that way, you get rid of one kayak and you have a new one. So
that's really the wonder of the skin-on frame, is that they are so flexible in the design and repairable.
Yeah.
Like I always joke, like if you have a fiberglass or carbon Kevlar or something, or like a surf ski, something super lightweight, like you drop it when you're loading it on your car and it shatters. Yeah. Or several $100s of repair, but like you drop a skin-on frame and it'll bounce. And that's one of my favorite things about it, is they're so rugged. The flex is something that a lot of people get into them for the first time. They're not ready for necessarily. They're not expecting, especially when you get skin-on frames into waves and you start to feel it flex and kind of follows the wave a little bit sometimes. There was one time I was surfing at my local break here on Lake Michigan, and the waves weren't very big. There were a couple foot breakers, very manageable. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take my skin-on frame out. So I got my skin-on frame and got my tulik and went paddling out, and I was having a grand old time, and then this one wave just kind of snuck up on me and just crashed over my head broadside. And I was completely in it. And the kayak did fine, it rode it out. But the strangest sensation was that I felt the skin on the kayak compress, and I felt my tulik, being squeezed because I was basically underwater. But then I felt this, I'll try to make the sound here. My tulik hood flapping against my cheeks. And it was all the air that was being squeezed out of the skin-on frame.
Oh wow.
And it was blowing through my hood. It was the weirdest thing. And I rode the wave out and I popped out the other side, and it was like I'd been vacuum sealed.
Wow.
The tulik was like just it just sucked down to me. I was like, what just happened? And popped the hood to the side a little bit and felt air rush back in.
Oh, wow.
It was a very, very strange sensation. I'm surprised I didn't break my kayak on that one.
Wow. See, that shows that you're really wearing your kayak. It's an extension of outer clothing
Yeah,
layer.
absolutely. Yeah, that fit, how it's fit to your body and proportional is such a critical thing. That's something I've noticed after going to Greenland too, is that you can, and being back in the States, is you can tell when a kayak was built for a person and it was built in the right proportions. Mm-hmm. Or even if someone is in a production kayak that fits their proportions. There's some elegance to it, some like golden ratio thing that looks right. Mm-hmm. In the competition, not everybody has a skin on frame. So a lot of teams and different members in the same team, they're sharing kayaks throughout the event. And so you can recognize like, oh, that's an Ilulissat kayak, that's a Kokotok kayak, just because that you see the shape and you see everybody using it. But you could tell when there's someone that didn't quite fit in it. They're a little low in it, they're a little tall, the kayak is overloaded and sitting low in the water. And it's kind of comes back to show like back in the day for seal hunting, they were always built to be so purposefully fit to the person. And it makes a huge difference in the control and the comfort and the how well the person can perform in the kayak. Mm-hmm. So to translate that now, like a well-sized kayak, or even just getting good outfitting in your cockpit for your hips or your knees, or adjusting their foot braces right, can make all the difference in the world for comfortable paddling or easier rolling or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it's the most important thing when selecting a kayak is that fit. When you get it right, it's like an extension of your body, and you become like a sea mammal.
Right, yeah.
On the water.
That's like the ultimate, in my opinion, like the ultimate goal of learning to roll or learning to brace or edging or whatever you want, whatever aspect you want to talk about. It's when it becomes instinctual, mm-hmm. when it just happens. Like someone gets hit broadside on a wave and they just do that low brace, and it's so smooth and quick, and they don't realize they're doing it. Or they turn to go into a harbor and they just pop that edge up, and they turn so gracefully and beautifully, and it just happens. And then you pointed out to them and they went, oh yeah, I did? Oh, cool. Because they don't realize they do it. Or that first time that someone rolls in rough conditions and they just pop up. It just happened. They didn't have to think about it. Like that's the real magic of kayaking, in my opinion, is when it just happens.
So how did you first meet Dubside?
Oh yeah, that that question. Let's see. So I first met Dubside, I think it was in 2012, I think it was. So I just graduated from university, and I did an expedition from Michigan to Quebec City, or just east of Quebec City.
Yes, that expedition. 34 days and...
Yeah, 860 miles in 34 days.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't have any time to waste because I didn't have any money. So I just cruised right along. So I did that trip, then spent the summer guiding. And partway through that summer, I got invited to teach at the Ontario Greenland Camp, which is a kayak symposium in Parry Sound, Ontario, done by James and Dipna of Ontario Sea Kayak Center. James Mankey was talking about them. They're great people, good friends of ours. So I went there. That was like one of my first events I'd been invited to besides training camp. And I remember seeing on the list of people like, Sherry and Turner are going to be there. Oh, that's really cool. Oh, Dubside's going to be there. Like, all right. I was so excited because like I learned to roll from watching his DVD and videos online. And actually, to be honest, a lot of your videos online.
My videos?
Your videos. I watched a ton of your videos in my formative years.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's, I'll admit I was kind of shocked when I got the email from you about being on the show. So
that's
dream come true.
Yeah, that's I'm thrilled to hear that, because that's exactly what I set out to do, is to inspire people to get into Greenland style kayaking. And I was just
You did it.
yeah, I just fell in love with it, and I wanted to share it. I feel like I've succeeded in something. That I influenced you,
You got me hooked.
and look how far you've gone with it. That's amazing.
Yeah, this whole thing has come full circle now. It's kind of a beautiful thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you met Dubside first at in Perry
In
Center.
Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were teaching at that event, and I remember I saw him from a distance. He was just with a couple people talking, and I walked up and introduced myself, and was trying not to fanboy at the time, because he was absolutely, and still is, my Yoda. He's my standard for rolling and ropes and paddling in a lot of different aspects, and so I was like, all right, try, keep it cool, Tim, keep it cool. Don't don't go too weird on this. So we got a chance to paddle with him and just hang out, and kind of one of the biggest like fanboy moments, I guess you could say, is during the rolling demonstration. I was in my Aquanaut again, this giant plastic kayak, and he was in some skin-on frame, and got near the end of the demonstration, and we're starting to do trick rolls and weird things, and just having fun with it. And Turner was up on the dock calling things out, and he's like, all right, does anybody have any requests? And I kind of turned it upside and went, hey, let's do the air sculling roll. And if you don't know, the air sculling roll is you extend the paddle, unlike a standard roll where the paddle's forward along the bow, you extend it backwards so it's along the stern. Mm-hmm. So then when you roll up, you stick the paddle out of the water and wave it around like you're sculling for support in the air, and you roll up.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to have a big, thick blade for this, like an airplane propeller, to really get that.
Yeah, you got to get that grip on the air.
Get that grip on the air, that's right. And so he set up to do it, and I'm like, no, I want to do it with you, because I've been practicing this. I saw him do it in a rolling video online. It might have been one of yours, I can't remember. But, set up, and I remember I looked over at him, and we did it opposite each other. So it started off and looked and went, all right, and tucked and rolled and popped up and came up in unison. And I remember I was so excited for one that I did it right, and I came up really good. And I looked over, and there he was, and he just kind of glanced over and kind of gave me a smile. And I'm like, all right, I did it. I can retire.
That's awesome.
I've hit all of my paddling goals and dreams and aspirations. So that was my first time meeting Dubside.
Yeah, very cool. Now, in 2018, when you went to Greenland, you ran into Kiliii Yuyan.
Yeah,
now, did you know
ended
him
up spending
before?
a lot of time. I knew Keely via his work, his photography and his video work and things.
Okay.
So I was familiar with who he was, but I'd never met him before. He came in partway through the competition, I think. Like 3 or 4 days into it, he flew in. I can't remember exactly the date. But we ended up kind of latching onto each other a little bit, because we, both paddlers, and I was trying to film things for the vlog, and he was actually working as a photographer. Yeah, it was cool to have a fellow American there that, besides Dubside, that we could kind of hang out with and explore Nuke together.
Did you know that he was going to be there?
I had no idea he was going to be there. No. Yeah, the only people I knew that were going to be there were Dubside and Maligiak.
So how did you run into him?
So the way the timing worked out is, so Maligiak and his friend Wolfgang from Norway, they were running an expedition. So they were going to be there for the competition time period, and then a day or two after the competition ended, they were taking a group of people up the Nuuk fjord, way up to the end, and they were going to paddle back. And it was like 80 or 90 kilometers or something. So they were going to take a week to do it with exploring and stuff along the way. So I got to meet some people from Taiwan and Japan and Alaska. And so there was like this little international division crowd that was all, always kind of hanging out together. And then Keely just kind of showed up one day and joined the party.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, it was a really fun group of people.
So for people who don't know Keely, can you talk a little bit about him?
Sure, I'll do my best.
Yeah.
So Kiliii Yuyan is a National Geographic photographer, and he's spent tons of time in the Arctic, especially in Alaska. He had a big project recently, I guess 3 or 4 years ago now, where he spent months and months on the sea ice with Inuit whale hunters way up in northern Alaska and documenting how they would spend weeks out on the ice in their camps and then would harpoon these whales and bring them in. And, like a single whale up there could feed the community for 6 months. And it was a traditional method of doing it, and they were very selective and they knew how to do it. And it was just a beautiful project that he recorded. And so he came to Greenland to kind of do the same thing with the Greenlanders and their kayaks. Is exploring that relationship that they have with their history and the future that they're taking them, and these beautiful, elegant watercraft and all these techniques that go along with it. So yeah, we ended up spending a lot of time taking photos of kayaks and visiting the museum and doing some pretty long hikes up north of Nuuk.
It'll be interesting to see what came out of that trip. I know best for the guy who made a skin-on-frame kayak out of cowhide.
I remember reading that like way back in when I was getting into kayaking.
Yeah, that was an amazing project because he and Brian Schultz went out and they built this kayak out of partly out of driftwood, and he skinned it with this hide that had been prepared by this community. Before he got into kayaking, he was a primitive skills expert. And he taught primitive skills, and it turned out to be this amazing kayak, but eventually the skin shrank and crushed the frame.
Yep.
So
yep, that's a common thing.
Yeah.
They always get crushed.
Yeah, I mean normally you would take the skin off every year and hang it up and then put it on for the kayak season.
Yeah, I remember reading about that when I think right after it happened, and that was one of those first things I read about skin on frames that really made me go, "What? You can do that?" It's still amazing to me to think about how, like, you literally can build these things out of anything. Like you can build them out of aluminum, you can build them out of wood, you can build them out of bits of bone and kitchen utensils and whatever you have laying around you can use. And that's something I find interesting with people are all around the world that want to build skin on frames, and there's clusters of people and outliers all over the place that build these things, and I always kind of come back with the same response if I get asked about wood selection. Use what you got.
Yeah.
Use whatever works, and really that is the more traditional way of building a kayak than finding the perfect straight grain cedar or Sitka spruce or whatever. You find what you have available and you adapt and adjust to use that material.
Yes. And that is, I think, a very important feature of the Greenland kayaking tradition.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's something found interesting as I've learned more and seen some museum recreations and things is all the various peoples of the Arctic are nothing if not extremely practical. Oh, it's a wonderful practicality. And I love seeing we do it that way because it works. It's like that's the best way we figured out to do it. Like that transition between hunting with primarily harpoons to hunting with rifles. Mm-hmm. The change in the equipment that happened is an interesting thing because like now the original layout of the kayak would have the basket of rope spooled up on the foredeck, and then the harpoon holder on the side, and then the avatok on the back, and all these things connected. And so you throw the harpoon and throw the rope, and if you hit it, then you get the avatok off and you chase the seal down. And then as firearms came, maybe that deck basket became less critical, so it shrank down or it disappeared, and then the blind, like that sail-shaped hunting blind, appeared on the foredeck, and then some had even like a rifle holder or a rifle rest, that stuck up, and the adaptation is so incredible to see. The problem, though, is that it also inevitably led to the disappearance of the kayak. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful to see the evolution of the technology, but then also sad to see that practicality also made it disappear.
Yeah. Well, impractical for their purposes of hunting, but definitely practical for my purposes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
When you first got into Greenland Style, did you experience any resistance from the regular paddling community?
I still experience some resistance here and there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I mean, it started off as I remember hearing all the jokes always about how, well, I'm glad you brought a stick so we could light a fire when we get to camp.
Yeah, I've heard that
sort
one.
of that sort of joke.
Oh,
That's
you
a pretty
guys
old
brought
one.
your own firewood.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, we could roast a chicken on that tonight, or whatever. Or dig a latrine. That's one that I heard a couple times. You use it like a shovel.
Well,
I guess.
That's true with the Europaddle.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
more true with the Europaddle.
Yeah, it actually shaped like a spoon. But I think because I think I was lucky in that there were enough people that did Greenland Style in the paddling community even then that it wasn't as like hardline like old BCU style coaches, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like no one was really strict and like held a doctrine of how kayaking should be. So I think I got lucky that there wasn't a whole lot. You still got the jokes and the things like that, but I think what has helped with kind of the adoption of traditional paddling in different communities is that people recognize, it might take a while, but people would recognize, oh, these skills are really useful. They're very elegant and easy. And again, back to the practical. They're very practical skills to have. Mm-hmm. Like I end up, if I'm in a pool session, I've ended up teaching whitewater kayakers quite often, and I usually end up teaching them more of a Greenland style roll, mm-hmm. Not necessarily with a Greenland paddle, but just the body motion. And I've gotten resistance from whitewater boaters saying, "Oh, you don't want to do that. You're spending so much extra time in the water. You're not protecting your head, blah de blah." But yeah. And I'd say, but they're rolling.
Yeah.
They're protecting their shoulders. Mm-hmm. They're protecting their elbows. They're getting up. They're able to hold themselves in a sculling position. Whereas like a sea to sea roll that is most common in whitewater is very fast. It's very powerful, but it's tough to learn. There's a lot of subtlety to it that makes it easy, but it's not a subtle thing to learn.
Yeah.
Everyone tries to really muscle their way through it, whereas you beginning with the softer, gentler, smoother Greenland style technique, you can get that roll happening, and then you can speed it up.
Yeah.
I feel like people have begun to recognize that there is practicality in learning these techniques, and even if you don't use a Greenland paddle, but blending them into modern technique, the grace, the body motion and stuff. Like one that like when I'm teaching a forward stroke or a lot of rolling, I always talk about the Greenland boxer pose. It's like elbows low, elbows in. You kind of keep your hands and your elbows in front of you, right? Nice and low to the deck. And you can take that same sort of theory and very easily adjust it to using with a Euroblade. Mm-hmm. And you can get a very smooth stroke. You can do a lot of, edging and bracing. It's the same techniques, just with a different paddle. It's just a lot of people don't learn it the Greenland way, or they learn it more the BCU way or the ACA way. But then now with more people coming up with a background, or maybe not necessarily a background, but seeing people with the Greenland stuff, I feel it's starting to be adopted a little bit more into the zeitgeist of paddling. At least I hope it is.
I still run into a lot of kayak guides out in the San Juan Islands who have never seen a Greenland paddle, and I have to stop and explain what it is.
Yep, I get that quite a lot too.
Yeah.
So this summer, when I was doing my expedition on Lake Superior, I was paddling along Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this big area of these tall sandstone cliffs, and there's tons of kayak groups that go in and out of there. It's a beautiful, beautiful area to paddle. And I had my Greenland paddle, and I was cruising along, and it was pretty early in the morning, and I came across a small guided group, and the guide, this younger guy, kind of shouted out, saying, "Oh, I thought you were someone I knew." It's like, "Oh yeah, why is that?" It's like, "Oh, you have that skinny paddle and the gray hat." And I went, "Would that be Henry?" And he's like, "Yeah." Like, yeah, it's like, "Oh yeah, I spent last night at his house." Like, like there's still pretty few of us out there, so you can still see it, and people will latch on to that one interesting thing as being recognizable, which I guess isn't too bad, but
yeah.
Or I don't know if you've had it with your videos, but I've had a couple people like at these trade shows like Quiet Water, Kenocopia, or wherever, they've come up and gone, "Oh yeah, I saw that video you did on the forward finish roll tutorial."
Oh
like,
yeah.
Oh, like, oh cool, people actually watch this stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, Tim, one last question. How can people find you on the internet?
So I'm everywhere at Kayak To The Sea. That's spelled KAYAK TOTHESEA. Kayak To The Sea. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. My main thing is on YouTube. So I've got a vlog series about my adventure to Greenland in 2018. I have some instructional tutorials on there. And I'm currently working on a video series from my expedition this summer on Lake Superior.
All right.
So those will be coming up hopefully in the next month or two. I'll start getting those released.
Great.
So.
Looking forward to it. I was wondering about the name of your YouTube channel, Kayak To The Sea, and it sounded so familiar to me.
Yeah.
And then I realized this is a reference to that children's book, Paddle to the Sea.
You got it, yeah.
Because you had done the 2012 expedition from Lake Superior down to the ocean.
Yeah, that was, I was in college, and I'll blame my dad for the idea, because he said something like, "Oh, well, when you graduate, you should take some time, and I don't know, maybe go paddling in Quebec or something like that." And I just went, "Aha, that's it." So, I really latched onto the idea, and I was thinking of following the Paddle to the Sea route, from northern Superior through all the Great Lakes and then out the St. Lawrence Seaway. And so I was prepping for it, and I was so excited, and I was ready to go, and it's going to be this big trip. And then someone said, they mentioned, the the logistical issues of like going through the heavily populated areas, like Detroit, Toledo, Toronto, Niagara, most of the lower Great Lakes. There's not very many places to just get out and camp. So I found the Trent Severn Waterway, which is this inland waterway across southern Ontario, and I thought, oh, that'll be a good one. I'll do that. And then I was actually at a pool session in Canada one night, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he said, "Oh, so you're gonna follow the Voyageur route?" And I went, "Oh, what's that?" And so that was up the French River north of Lake Huron, up to the town of North Bay, and then down to the Ottawa River, and then most of the length of the Ottawa River to the St. Lawrence. And so that's the route that I ended up taking. So I got the name from the children's book, Paddle to the Sea became Kayak to the Sea, but I actually ended up following a very different route to get there, which is kind of a fitting metaphor, I guess.
Have you seen the the film version of the book?
Oh, of course. I love it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I think, I saw that first when I was a kid, and it's so memorable. Only in recent years did I look it up again. You can find it on YouTube. It's a 28-minute film made in 1966 where a Indian boy carves a little toy canoe and sends it into the creek, which leads to a river, which leads to the lakes, and goes down the St. Lawrence River to the ocean. And at the bottom of the canoe is written, "Please put me back in the water. I am paddled to the sea."
Mm-hmm.
That film stuck with me for a really long time. I always wanted to carve a little canoe like that.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't carve a canoe, but I kind of ended up being that little figurine almost, following that same route, because it did end up being a joke for a while. Just put me back in the water. just got to keep going downhill.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Keep in touch.
Yeah, will do.
Thanks everyone for listening. If you are interested in learning more, I highly recommend checking out Tim Gallaway's YouTube channel, Kayak To The Sea, where he has documented his trip to the 2018 Greenland National Kayaking Championships in a number of short videos. I'll put the link in the show notes. Please tune in next time when Dubside and I will be back with another episode of the Dubcast with Dubside.